stuff is it was a movement. It was an artistic movement in Hollywood. There was no economic and practical reason for this movement to happen. It wasn't that the films made a spectacular amount of money. It was just that the artists themselves found a new way of making films and speaking and allowing, after the Depression, after World War II, they suddenly were liberated enough to try doing new things, more adult themes in movies, new ways of shooting the films. Actors who were handsome, romantic leading men wanted to play the villain for a change. It was just a movement driven by the artists themselves. Somehow along the way, people assumed that these were B movies. That was certainly not the case. I mean, when Billy Wilder made Double Indemnity at Paramount, that was not a B movie. So here was this movement that started in the early 1940s and sort of culminated in the early 1950s. And I have to say that nothing symbolizes the peak of the film noir movement more than the movie that you are about to see. Because this is the high end of Hollywood production. When you get Monty Clift and Elizabeth Taylor in a movie directed by one of the preeminent filmmakers in Hollywood, George Stevens, this is the total A-list version of film noir. But interestingly, a movie based on a classic American novel from 1925, Theodore Dreiser's An American Tragedy. I don't see how this movie could be any more noir. Despite the gloss and the sheen and the patina and the pedigree of the people involved, this is as hardcore a film noir as you can possibly get. So it is a great thrill and a privilege to be able to introduce to you the son of the man who made this movie. But that he'll talk about that part. I'm excited because the work that I have done for the past 20 years, I kind of fell into it. It was accidental. I was a writer promoting my books, and then suddenly it was like, I want to show this movie, and I want to show that movie, and why can't I find it? And then the next thing you know, I'm suddenly a lobbyist, and I'm a film restorationist and preservationist. And I came to learn that there was somebody doing all of this stuff long before me. And that is the man that you are about to meet. I mean, he is so significant in preserving the history of American cinema, whether it's through helping create the National Endowment for the Arts, of which the American Film Institute was the first beneficiary. I mean, the contribution I remember when I was a little kid watching the American Film Institute tributes on television to the likes of Orson Welles and John Ford and Jimmy Cagney. That's how I learned about the careers of these people. And what more can I say? The man that I'm about to introduce to you is responsible for all of that. He is the founder of the American Film Institute. He created American Film Magazine. Like I say, the National Endowment for the Arts. He is one of the most significant contributors to the preservation of American cinema culture. Ladies and gentlemen, George Stevens, Jr.
So happy to have an opportunity to talk with you and to not talk too long because I don't want to cramp my father's style. But I just was thinking that there's one thing I can say today that I couldn't have said if I were doing this a year ago. And that is that my father, with his movie, gave me a title for my memoir. That wasn't true a year ago because I didn't know what to call it until we came upon what I title I'm quite fond of, My Place in the Sun, Life in the Golden Age of Hollywood and Washington. And this book, I will kind of interchange between My Place in the Sun and A Place in the Sun. I'm sure you can keep score. When I graduated from high school, I didn't have a summer job. My father had come back a couple of years earlier from 3 years away at war, and he said, well, you can help me. So he gave me 2 assignments. One was to break down Theodore Dreiser's American Tragedy, the great novel of Theodore Dreiser, and to list every character in part 1 and part 2, and every scene and all of the details in 2 notebooks. And I did that. The other was to read scripts and books that came from Paramount to our house in North Hollywood that were submitted to him. And it was kind of heavy going for a 17-year-old, because there were a lot of treacly love stories that were not so engaging on hot summer afternoons. But one day, I picked up a small book and read it in the afternoon. And I went to see my father that night. He was in bed reading. And I walked in with the book, and I said, Dad, this is really a good story. I think you ought to read it. And he looked at me and said, well, why don't you tell me the story? So I found myself walking around his bed, doing my best to stitch together my memories of Jack Schaefer's Shane in a way that would keep my father's interest. And it was really, I guess, probably what he had in mind was it was an opportunity for me to find out whether I had any interest in this world and any aptitude for it. And this led to the next summer, I was on location in Jackson Hole in a job called company clerk for $125 a week, which was bonanza at my station in life, and watched the making of what we didn't think about it then, but what turned out to be a film classic. And then after this summer following it, I went to Occidental College before Barack Obama made it famous. And one day on a Saturday, I went over to the studio at Paramount, and Dad was shooting A Place in the Sun. And they shot on Saturdays in those days, 6 days a week. And I watched them, and Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift came on the set, and they had a scene to do, and my father greeted them and talked quietly. His sets were very quiet. He said to Bonnie, well, why don't you go there, take a spot by the pool table. Elizabeth, why don't you get a place over there where you're comfortable? Let's just run the scene. And they did, and the script clerk was there to help with, dialogue, the first time they were doing it and all. And they kind of walked through the scene, and they finished, and Dad said, well, that's nice. Why don't we just do it again? And they did it again. And walked through it and all came. And he said, okay, that's interesting. He said, well, let's do it. Let's just do it again. And they went and they did the scene again, And then afterwards, Monty Clift kind of hurried over to Dad, started talking with him, and then Elizabeth came over and had this conversation. And anyway, they then kind of rehearsed the scene, and he gave them some direction, and he picked the setup, and they went ahead and started lighting it. And I asked my father, I said, why did you have them do it 3 times before you kind of stepped in and did your directing? He said, sometimes, he said, it's helpful to have actors discover they need a little help. I was a freshman in college, and Dad had taken me to Elizabeth's trailer and introduced me during the morning, and they broke for lunch, and Elizabeth came over and said, would you like to have lunch? And I don't think I had any voice for an answer, but we went off, and I walked down the studio street and into the dining room in her wake as the hostess took her to her special table. And we had lunch, the 2 of us. I recall, I thought of her as a rather sophisticated woman, because she was, I think, 3 months older than I. And we had hamburgers and milkshakes. And I have no recollection of what we talked about, but I knew that I had a good story that night for the fraternity house. So how to talk about these movies, Mike Nichols, made his name in comedy on, Chicago and on Broadway, and then as a director, many fine pieces. And the first film he made was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? And he'd never been on a movie set, or if at all, just in passing. And people wondered and asked, how were you able to so brilliantly direct a difficult film? And his answer was, I watched Place in the Sun 150 times. That's in Mark Harris's new book, and Mike told me that it was the film, he said, everything you need to know about making a film is there if you watch this film. I went with my father to the Academy Awards in 1952, and I sat with him in the auditorium, and it was Joseph L. Mankiewicz who came on stage. He won the previous year for, I think, All About Eve, and he read the nominees. John Huston for The African Queen, William Wyler for Detective Story, Vincent Minnelli for An American in Paris, Elia Kazan for Streetcar Named Desire, and George Stevens for A Place in the Sun. I guess I wouldn't be telling you this story if John Huston won. But that is a rather A-list of nominees, wouldn't you say? And of course, my father didn't. But driving home that night, my mother and his mother were with us. His mother, Dorothy Cooper, who'd been on the stage in San Francisco with her husband, his father, Lander Stevens. And my mother and grandmother in the back seat, and Dad was driving the car. I don't know how we managed red carpets in those days. He was driving the car. And the Oscar was on the seat between us. And I guess I was 17 at the time, and maybe I was pretty excited, but whatever. For some reason, he looked over at me, and he said, we'll have a better idea of what kind of a film this is in about 25 years. Now, this was before Cinematex. There were no DVDs. Pictures came and went. But he, having been raised in the theater and having read widely, though he never graduated from high school, he the important films are the ones that have lasting value. And I guess that had an influence on me. I don't think, of course, he did not know at the time that he was speaking to the future founder of the American Film Institute, which is largely based on the test of time, as we celebrate these noir films. But he knew that was important, and it's just amazing as I write this book and look back on my life of how the whole idea of the test of time has really governed kind of what my aspirations were in terms of institutions I headed, making my own films, and it's a pretty good measure. You know, the AFI Life Achievement Award was really, there were no retrospectives when we started it. It was really an innovation. And, you know, that we recognize filmmakers whose work has stood the test of time. That's the phrase. And then years later, when AFI had its offices in the Kennedy Center, and we had the AFI Theater in the Kennedy Center, we had the 10th anniversary of AFI. It was in 1977, and did a gala in the Kennedy Center Opera House. Jimmy Carter had a reception for the first time for all the movie people in the White House, and it was on CBS, and it was very successful. And I remember at rehearsal, I was standing in that great opera house and looking up, and in the box tier where the honorees said, I saw the name card that said Jimmy Carter, you know, where he would be sitting. And an idea just came to me. And I went to see Roger Stevens, no relation, who headed the Kennedy Center the next day. And I said, Roger, you really ought to have your own event here at the Kennedy Center. And he said, do you have any ideas, was the way he phrased it. And I said, yeah, I do have an idea. And I said, I can just tell you a phrase from the marble, the words carved in marble on the front of your building, that encapsulates this idea for a national television show, an event that would raise money for the Kennedy Center and celebrate the arts. And those words are, I look forward to an America that will not be afraid of grace and beauty, that will reward achievement in the arts the way we reward achievement in business and statecraft. And those, of course, are the words of President Kennedy from a speech he made in 1963 at Amherst College honoring Robert Frost. But that is the basic idea of the Kennedy Center Honors. Anyway, so this test of time has been important in my life. Do you have any? Do you want to steer me anywhere, leader?
I hate to say this,
Give him a glass of water, but we're pretty close to time, aren't we?
we are.
Yeah. And I don't need a glass of water.
I can't, Jordan, because you have moved me to tears over
Oh,
here.
my God.
Saying this, because and I will just add this.
Just one quick thing, and the movie, the great thing about the movie, it speaks for itself. I mean, everyone will understand this, and I always do this, George, and you'll get a kick out of this. How many people have not seen A Place in the Sun? Be honest.
Wow.
See? See? And that's how you stand the test of time, is you get people to come out and see the movies on a movie screen the way they were meant to be seen. So now all you people who have not seen it before, you're going to leave this theater and say, I saw one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. And that movie has stood the test of time. And also,
How many of you who say you have not seen it? All right, right. How many people have seen it, but only on the small screen, only on?
I want to add, George, because this sort of torch passing is very, very important. I know you're not going anywhere anytime soon, but I was so very moved and honest to say that, the work that you have done has been a great inspiration, not only to me, but to many, many people. Sometimes we set out to be artists, and then other times I realized the value of preserving and restoring other artists' work. And it has meant so much to me to come to this theater this weekend and see the young people who have come out, and their parents have brought them out, and to see 11 and 12-year-olds coming to watch movies in this format just means the world to me, and I know it does to you as well. It was what inspired you to do all of this, so it's absolutely fantastic. I just want to thank you.
Thank you. One added thought, because you are the audience. Down at the time my father was working in the studios, and the studio heads had this, he had to sue Paramount Pictures to make this film. They totally rejected it. I was looking for a paragraph here, but I didn't find it in the dark. And the response of Henry Ginsberg, who was the president of Paramount Pictures, who wrote back rejecting the idea and having done that, and my father protesting, and him saying how disappointed he was that you don't accept the advice of everyone at Paramount Pictures, including Mr. Barney Balaban himself, that he should have deferred to their thinking that this film should not be made. So it's always a struggle, and they used to say that the mentality of the audience is about that of a 12 or 14-year-old urging people to talk down to the audience, and it is my mantra, gathered from my father. The most important thing I learned from him was respect for the audience. They spoke to him about Shane and the King Arthur mythology and all of that, and he said, well, I really made this film for a truck driver in Kansas. He spends a lot of time alone on the road and has his own thoughts, and he will bring some of his own curiosity and thinking to this film. And he really respected, he said, the engine of the movie you're going to see tonight is the collected energy of the people, you people, watching it. And so, thank you for coming.